Hey, good morning. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody had a fantastic long weekend if you're here in over here in Toronto. And I'm not sure if it was for the entire Canada. I'm not sure, but pretty sure for sure, here in Toronto, all of you had a nice long weekend. And let me know in the comments. You can see me and hear me okay. I was having some technical difficulties last week with LinkedIn's notifications. So hopefully all is good today and you're all able to see that I'm live. I'm just going to check real quick, folks, make sure that all is good on my end and that I am live. And yes, looks like we got the notification here. Awesome, fantastic. So let me know in the comments, folks, where you're tuning in from. Shout out to everyone tuning in from Facebook, from YouTube, from also Periscope. Periscope, shout out to everyone from Periscope. Appreciate everyone who might be tuning in. And of course, shout out to everyone from LinkedIn. Which is where most of my followers are. I see people are starting to tune in. Make sure you hit like, folks. Make sure you hit like and say hi in the comments. Let me know who you are, where you're tuning in from, which city. And I'll get this thing started shortly. So today's topic, very interesting topic and very, very dynamic guest I have with me is Emal Bariali. And we're going to be talking about business analysis. And he has some controversial things to say about Agile, right? So those of you tuning in, you definitely want to be sticking around for this conversation. I don't see any comments, folks. Don't be shy. Put in the comments. Let me know who you are, where you're tuning in from. And also feel free to write any questions you have about business analysis as well as Agile. I'm going to have Emal respond to your questions probably close to the end of the segment. We got Ryan. Hey, Ryan, nice to see you. Nice to see you here. Ryan's tuning in from the T dot, from the 416. Or is it the 905, Ryan? But thanks for tuning in. Who else is in here? Let me know in the comments, folks. Don't be shy. And I'll get this thing started shortly. But before we get this thing started, so just to give you a heads up for those of you who are actively job seekers, I recently had a very great experience at the torontojobs.ca virtual career conference. So they've invited me to come back for later this month in August. Sorry, the date's cut off because of that scrolling banner there. So let me just briefly take it off. So yeah, it's going to be Tuesday, August 25th, folks. The entire event's from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. My segment, I believe, again, is at, I believe, 3 p.m. But I'm going to be speaking about how to effectively utilize IT recruiters in your job search. So make sure you check that out, folks. I believe you can sign up for the conference at torontojobs.ca. And look, the word on the streets is right now they're offering the general admission for free. So if you're a job seeker, sign up right away. I believe the general admission will be put up to $5 or $10 or something like that, which is still not too bad. But make sure you sign up, folks, because I'll be and not just myself. There's going to be many other great speakers as well. So if you're sick and tired of hearing from me, there's definitely other speakers over there that'll help you with various topics in regards to your job search. And this one is specifically for IT professionals, folks. So make sure I keep that in mind. Make sure you sign up. And for those of you interested in my session, definitely hope to see you there and happy to see you there. Now, without further ado, I'm going to bring on my today's guest. Before I do, I'm going to give a brief introduction. But my guest today is Emal Bariali, and Emal and myself, we connected through LinkedIn. And Emal is a practicing business analyst for over 15 years in many different domains across the private and the public sectors, right here in Toronto, Canada. He currently provides BA consulting services for large-scale business transformation projects. And Emal is also the recent founder of the BA Blocks community and also offers a training program. He has a great YouTube channel, folks. So make sure you check him out. And after this session, make sure you check him out. And in regards to his training platform, I do have a link that I'm going to be sharing in the comments shortly. So all of you interested in signing up for his BA training program, certainly make sure you feel free to check that out. But it's going to be an awesome discussion today, folks. He has some controversial things to say about Agile specifically. Now, that being said, I want everyone to be respectful of Emal's viewpoints and his perspective. The point of this is not to start some kind of a huge online debate or some, BA Agile war or something like that, right? So everyone, give Emal a warm welcome. I'm going to bring him in shortly. And looking forward to a great discussion. So, Emal, welcome to the show, and thanks so much for your time, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Dean. And Dean, I got to start off by saying that the amount of work that you're putting into all these live sessions that you're doing are very impressive. So,
Thank you so
and I'm
much.
sure that everybody in your audience is benefiting hugely from getting the type of the conversations that you're having right now. So, I love what you're doing.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Emal. I really appreciate that. And before we get started, Emal, we have some shout outs from some people here. So we got Amil from Toronto. We got Charmi coming in from Chandigarh, India. Wow, all the way from Chandigarh. Thanks for tuning in, Charmi.
Hi, Charmi.
We got Wale from Accra, Ghana. Wow, all the way from Accra. Thanks so much for tuning in, Wale. We got someone, hi, Dean. We got Danushka. Hey, Danushka, thanks for tuning in. Not sick and tired. Okay, maybe a little. All right, I guess that's in regards to hearing me speak all the time. We got Sandeepan and we got Dhruv. Awesome. So, folks, make sure you say hi to Emal in the comments. And we're gonna get this thing started right away. But Emal, I know I kind of gave you a brief introduction regarding yourself, but anything you want to add, or before we get started with the whole discussion about business analysis and agile?
I think you've said it all. I've been a practicing business analyst for 15 years, and the primary thing that I do is the primary service I provide to my clients is basically everything under the business analysis set of activities and deliverables that BAs do. So typically what I do with my consulting clients is I go in normally, hopefully at the very inception stage, where I help them figure out how much it's going to cost to produce a certain type of solution. And then I'll usually see them throughout the whole implementation phase of the project. So that's on the consulting end. That's what I do. What we've done recently is we've started up a community that anybody can join for free. And I think you said you're going to provide the link for that. But we've started a community where business analysts who are trying to get into the profession and who are trying to really kind of get their bearings in the profession can come in. They can ask questions. There's no cost to it currently. So they can just come in and they have direct access to me. And I provide video responses, detailed video responses to many of the questions that come in. So that's what I do. And I am here to talk about anything and everything business analysis. I love this profession. I have no intentions of stopping being a practicing business analyst. And I'd love to hear the questions that come in from our community members. So the thing that I want to start talking about mostly is about the agile development philosophy. And part of the reason why I think it's important for us to talk about this is because I feel that there's so much confusion between a lot of what people hear out in the training space and the IT industry as a whole, and what actually happens on the ground in most organizations. So my take on this, based on my experience and based on the conversations I've had with many other software developers, software architects, project managers, is that most organizations out there are not a good fit for the pure agile development philosophy. And I know that we're probably going to get a lot of comments, but if you let me make my case, I think by the end of this, I'll have you convinced, hopefully.
Gotcha. Okay, so folks, hold on the comments for now. Maybe let's let Emal build a case for what he's saying right now regarding agile. So as a good starting point, Emal, just in case, for those viewers who might be non-technical or not from the BA space, can you kind of set the groundwork first and explain what exactly business analysis is before we get into, the other nuts and bolts of it?
Yeah, in simplest terms, essentially what a business analyst does is, in most medium to large size companies, business analysts are the people who help the organization enact some sort of a change. So, for example, if a company is interested in doing some process improvement because they want to save some money, or because the way that they're doing things is not taking full advantage of some of the new technology that exists, typically what they'll do is they'll have a business analyst that helps them figure out exactly what the problem might look like, what a possible solution might look like, and then work with the other teams inside that company to help implement whatever solution the company chooses.
Right.
So essentially what the business analyst does is there's a set of activities and deliverables that business analysts will take part in to carry all of that out. But essentially, as a business analyst, you're helping your company enact some sort of a change inside the organization, and the type of change can differ from company to company, project to project.
Gotcha. And also the other definition, if you can get into it, Emal, is what is agile?
Agile, I would say, is it's a software development philosophy. So traditionally, the way that software has been built is using Waterfall. So Waterfall basically has an organization figure out exactly what the solution is going to look like right up front. So there's a big analysis effort right up front. And then they have their development teams build out the entire solution. And only when all of that is done is when the end customer actually sees it. Some of those projects can take 6 months. I've been on projects that have been 2.5, 3 years long. So in a waterfall methodology, you would have the clients basically sitting there and waiting until the end of the project to get what they need. What Agile says is that you should strive to take that solution, whatever that solution is that you're delivering, try to break it up into smaller pieces and get it in front of the customer as quickly as possible to mitigate some of the risks of doing waterfall. And the risks of doing waterfall typically is that in waterfall projects, when you're completely out on your own and you're spending a lot of time building something that your client hasn't seen, you don't get any feedback. And so all Agile says is take your gigantic projects, split them down into smaller pieces, get them in front of the client as soon as possible so they can start to give you feedback, so that when you're finished the project, you give the client something that they actually want, as opposed to coming back to you and saying, this is completely off the mark. Gotcha. And so a lot of IT projects fail because of the fact that they don't have enough client input. And the purpose of the Agile development philosophy is to get clients engaged and to get products out a lot more earlier in the process, I would say.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess kind of connecting this with what you kind of, started off with, that most, you feel that most, I think you said most organizations, right?
That's right.
Most organizations are not fit for a true Agile kind of, I guess a methodology or environment.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that, Emal? I know that's kind of a very broad question, but maybe you can get into kind of break that down or whatnot for us. But what did you mean by that, and why is that the case?
So absolutely, I can break that down for you. If you are now just starting to become a business analyst, or you're trying to get into the profession, I want you to look at the landscape of all companies really in two broad categories, okay? There are companies that are software companies that are very product oriented. So Google, for example, is a gigantic software company, and they have a product called Gmail. It's an example I like to use, right?
Yeah.
That is one category of companies that you may end up in as a business analyst, okay? But that is the much smaller group of companies that exist out there. So you'll have a Google, you have enterprise software providers like SAP, Oracle, Infor, right?
Right.
The business analyst jobs in those companies are I would say they're probably less than 5% of all the business analyst jobs out there.
Wow.
The number of and the reason for that is because every medium to large size company needs business analysts, right? So if you just sum up a list of all of the medium and large size companies throughout the entire globe and you compare them with the number of software companies that exist, they're two completely different things, right? And so if you look at most business analyst roles that don't exist inside software companies, right? They exist inside companies like large insurance companies, big banks, pick any industry, construction companies. Every company that needs to implement some sort of a change inside its organization, and it's either a medium or large size organization, needs business analysts. And those non-software development companies have a completely different culture. They have a completely different type of environment. They're up against very different pressures than software companies are, right? A company like Google, and I've talked about this in a previous video on our YouTube channel, but a company like Google would not survive in the industry that they're in if they tried to build Gmail in a waterfall way. If you have a Gmail account, chances are that you notice that they do incremental changes. So you'll log in one day and you see, oh wait, the button looks a little bit different. There are a couple of extra features here. They're running purely Agile to be able to do that because they're doing continual releases. Most organizations, non-software organizations that build software to use internally can't afford to operate that way. The overhead's too big. There are a lot of different reasons we can get into. But what ends up happening with most companies that try to go Agile is that they are sold on the idea of being quicker, being more agile. And when they try to implement it, they realize that they have so many constraints that prevent them from doing pure Agile. And what they end up doing is they shift back into more of like a hybrid Agile development philosophy, which basically takes some of the more beneficial aspects of Agile, but they don't run a purely Agile team. They don't do a lot of the stuff that Agile asks for. And so for most business analysts who are trying to learn how to become a business analyst, I would say that try to ignore a lot of the industry hype that exists around, doing pure agile. Understand the concepts. Make sure that if you're in an interview, you can speak very intelligently to that development philosophy. But know that as soon as you get on the ground, even if the person you're interviewing with, the company you're interviewing with, tells you that they're agile, trust me, once you step inside that company, you're going to see that they are very far off of the ideal that agile wants them to be at. And you're going to have to perform in an environment that's not purely agile. Okay, so that's essentially what I'm trying to say here. I'm not saying don't learn agile. I'm not saying don't invest any time into it. Just make sure you're investing the right amount of time so that you're prepared to deal with what's on the ground when you get there.
Gotcha. Fantastic. I mean, so that was a pretty surprise. I mean, so what you're saying is only 5% of the actual BA roles out there, from what you're saying, Emal, is like purely 100% agile.
I would say, I would probably say even less because,
really? Wow.
And again, I don't have the stats to back this up. I can do some number crunching,
Yeah.
but if you just do a common sense calculation, you'll notice most companies that exist in the world are not software companies. They make up a very tiny fraction of the companies that exist out there. Most companies are out there in industry. They're building buildings, they're building cars, they're doing all kinds of other things other than software, right? Those types of organizations have, like I said, they have so many constraints organizationally that prevents them from being pure agile. So like I said, in many of those organizations, their senior management, it really kind of buys into it. I can't tell you the number of times where I've spoken to a senior manager who says, hey, look, we're a purely agile shop, so you need to be ready for that. When I step on the ground, on site, I see that what the senior manager thinks is happening is completely different from the situation on the ground. And that is the norm in most organizations.
Gotcha. Okay. And I guess what you're saying makes very, perfect sense, Emal. Like, as you said before, when you were speaking, when you were kind of defining agile, agile comes from, it is a software development philosophy. So for it to exist in its pure form in a non-SaaS or non-software related organization, I guess that should be pretty, it makes perfect sense, right?
Exactly right. That's exactly. And I'm glad you said that because most companies out there have a core competence, right? The core competence of an insurance company doesn't rest on the fact that they're a good software development team, right? Yeah. Their core competence is, hey, do I know actuarial science well enough to build the right products to be able to compete with my competitors? That is their core competency. Core competency of a software development company is build good software products. Software companies can't afford to do that in a waterfall way. They have to do it in an agile way, right?
Gotcha. So in these setups, Emal, where you're saying that, I guess there are these companies, they're taking bits and pieces from the agile mindset and the agile philosophy. Is that really? I would assume that it is still effective because it is in use and stuff like that. But does it kind of does it make it less effective, or like what are the negatives or the positives of this hybrid approach?
It's very effective. So the one company where I've seen agile done right had actually it was a software company, but they hadn't even gone into doing Scrum or Kanban or any of the other methodologies that exist in Agile. They had built their own way of being Agile because they understood the forces that really are involved. But for more traditional companies, there are huge benefits in adopting some of the basic principles of Agile as long as they do it in the right way. So, for example, if an insurance company tries to do Scrum will say normally you should do 2-week development sprints, right? Yeah. And at the end of 2 weeks, you should release something to the customer. Most insurance companies that exist in the world, it would take you 2 weeks to get something from your development environment into production. Forget about all the development effort that it takes. So you can see that in an example like that, a company simply just can't do Scrum the way that Scrum prescribes it, right? What a company like that has to do is look at their own development cycles, right? So in a large, let's say you work for I won't name any insurance companies, but let's say you work for a large, company that does reinsurance. Right, they would look at themselves, if they have, 50, let's say 10,000 employees, they would say, our development life cycles can't afford to be 2 weeks. What we have to do is we have to do 2-month development cycles and try to release something at at about 2.5-month mark to our end clients and then get our feedback, especially for larger initiatives. Now, many companies, many organizations out there do this. They say, look, we have this massive program that's going to take multiple years. We can't just afford to go away to do it. So let's release something to our end customers. Let's say in the first 4 months, let's get something out to them. And then after that, every 2 to 3 months, we'll try to get more things out to them. Companies who try to adopt that agile principle tend to do very well because they mitigate a lot of the risks of waterfall without going purely agile.
Okay, got you. So from what you're saying, Emal, I mean, it's still a good approach, like, this hybrid kind of a way of doing things. But I guess what you're saying is, let's call it what it is. Like, let's not call it like, this is a pure agile environment. By the way, Emal, like any reason why companies would kind of market themselves as, a pure agile shop when in fact they are more so hybrid?
So a lot of that, so in many medium to large size organizations, you got to understand that there's a gigantic disconnect between what management thinks is going on the ground versus what's actually going on the ground. And like, it's not, there's no nefarious causes for that, right? This is just the way large organizations function, is that you'll have a senior director or you have a vice president of an organization who's been sold on the idea of going agile. They're being told a lot of times, hey, we're doing agile as best as we possibly can, but them not understanding software development and not really understanding detailed operational level things that happen on the ground, they're going to believe that they are agile. So when I speak to a VP who says, hey, we're a purely agile shop here, that's exactly how we function, I say, well, let me get on the ground and let's see what level of agile you've implemented in your organization, and we can work with whatever you have, right? So the disconnect really has to do with the fact that senior leadership, a lot of times, in the effort of trying to just simplify things and not really understanding all the details on the ground, will just think that they're agile, but the reality on the ground is something very different.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. So we have some great questions here. So I'll take some of the questions, folks, but feel free, any questions you have for Emal, put in the comments. So we have a question here from, let's see here. So where's that question? So we got Rajesh. So Rajesh, thanks for tuning in. So Rajesh says, Emal, could you also comment about hybrid approaches being used in some organizations? I have personally used waterfall agile approaches depending on the solution we're building. I guess you kind of touched on that already, Emal, but anything you want to add to that for Rajesh?
Yeah, I think hybrid agile is probably the optimum way of doing things for most organizations. So adopt some of the agile principles and do them in a way that your organization is comfortable with. They're trying to go purely agile is such a huge shift across many different aspects of an organization that it just, if an organization really pushes hard and tries to go agile, regardless of what happens, they're going to end up in a much more chaotic situation than they were in before. And so agile implementation can go wrong. I would say that most organizations should strive for the hybrid agile approach, because if they don't strive for it, they're going to end up there in the long run anyways, because they're not a good fit for pure agile.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. We got a question here from David. David, thanks so much for tuning in. So David says, if my team develops in-house software, and in brackets he put purchasing applications or internal surveys, etc., which methodology you suggest is better?
So I would say that try to go agile if the following conditions are true. Okay. So your first condition is that your product has to have, you have to have the ability to split your product up into smaller chunks, meaning that your first release of whatever product you're building has to be useful to the business. And that's what in the agile world, they typically call that the minimum viable product, or the MVP. So condition number one is can you build something useful to the business that is smaller than the full scope, and you can release it to them and they can actually start using it while they're waiting for the rest of the product to be built. If that's possible, I think you are a good fit for the hybrid agile methodology. The second is does your team internally have the capability of doing releases? Because doing regular releases, there's a cost to doing a release, right? Releases aren't free. So every time somebody has to do a release at the end of a 2-week sprint or a 1-month sprint, development on a certain area stops. There are other people who have to get involved inside the company to actually push things from development to test to production. There's a certain amount of testing. So there's cost to doing every single release. How many releases can you realistically afford to do as part of your project. So think that through a little bit. Culturally, can your developers, if you have developers who've been with you for 20 years and they've been on Waterfall project, can they make enough of a mindset shift to be able to do regular releases and to deal with some of the pressures that Agile would have that they wouldn't see in Waterfall? So if you meet those three conditions, I would say that you'd be a good fit for a hybrid Agile approach. Anything else I would say is probably more of a Waterfall and just try to manage the risks of doing Waterfall.
Fantastic. So, David, I hope that helps, and thanks for your question, and thanks, Emal, for fielding that question. Rajesh says thank you. So that in response to your the advice you gave before, Emal. So, Emal, I mean, speaking of Agile, like, and you mentioned something really interesting right now about senior developers who might have been, very much used to a waterfall methodology. What are some of the key challenges you have faced? Like, I'm sure in your 15 years, you've faced these projects where you're transitioning maybe into an Agile mindset. What are some of the key challenges, and how can the viewers who might be going through something similar as BAs themselves in getting people to move into more of an Agile, even if it's a hybrid Agile kind of a mindset?
The single biggest challenge that I hear from developers who are trying to go, so just to be upfront here, most developers that I've worked with, most software architects that I work with, would willingly do Agile if it was done right. Okay. Mm-hmm. But because of the way that it gets implemented in most organizations, they are very averse to it, because in many organizations, Agile is just code for really unorganized or a little bit chaotic. Okay. The single biggest challenge for most organizations is the fact that management has expectations of Agile that Agile just wasn't suited for. They've been sold on the idea that they can do a lot more work in a shorter period of time. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what Agile was intended to do. And so the biggest problem that most software developers have isn't with doing Agile work. It's with the fact that the management of the organization will come to them and say, hey, look, I know that we said that this was a 2.5-year project, but since we're going Agile, we need to get this done in 1.5 years. Mm-hmm. Completely wrong. And so that's why most developers give up, because they don't really have the ability to explain to most people what Agile is and what it should be. And so they tend to have a very negative view of it just because of the way that it gets implemented in most organizations. So I would say that management's misunderstanding of what Agile can do for them is probably the single biggest problem.
Gotcha. Okay, amazing. And we got a thank you from David. So David said, thank you very much for your explanation, Emal. Awesome. We got some feedback here from Helen. Helen says, good insights, Emal. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So Emal, we have some aspiring, and by the way, let me just give a quick shout out to some other individuals that tuned in. We got BT Nandu. Nice to see you here, BT. You're usually always, showing up for the live stream. So appreciate you tuning in. We got a comment here from Nazish. So Nazish says it means the rest of the companies are following waterfall methodology. Would you say it's mostly hybrid, Emal, or is it primarily waterfall?
I would say it's probably it really depends on the organization. So yeah. I would say that the majority of organizations who've tried to go Agile are going to be hybrid Agile. Okay. But many organizations out there still are probably mostly waterfall out there.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, and thanks for your comment, Nazish. Great comment there. So Emal, we do have some aspiring BAs as well as some current BAs out there. So if we can kind of shift the discussion to talking about actual business analysis as well. Yeah. But before we get into that, can you tell the viewers and tell us about how is your career kind of gone into the business analysis space? Was it a conscious decision you made, or like how did your career go forth?
For me, it was a fully conscious decision. So okay, I know that this is probably not the case for most people who get into business analysis, but my career path has been probably a little bit different, because most analysts that I meet in my client engagements are people who've landed into the profession just haphazardly, or they've been part of a project team before and they've seen that the role exists and they've tried to move in that direction. My own career, I have an undergrad in IT, I have a post-diploma in software development, I have a master's degree in information systems. Everything that I've done before I even landed my first job, the first 7 years of my life, was dedicated to becoming a business analyst. Okay. And when I started my BA career, I originally actually started off as a programmer analyst a while, like very, very early on. Right. And when I did the work, software development for me wasn't as exciting in the work world as it was in school. And in school, you get a lot of good abstract challenges to tackle, right? But when I got into the work world, I thought this was very light and not very challenging. So after the first couple of very small projects I worked on as a developer, I went to our director and I said, look, this isn't the right fit for me. I'd like to move more into an analyst role, which is the role I've really been aiming for with my education and career anyways. So I moved into more of an analyst role and I just ran with it from there. I worked as a full-time employee for many years in a couple of different organizations until the point where I felt like I knew enough to be able to help customers and clients on a consulting basis. And so I basically just started up my own business analysis consulting shop, and that's what I do now.
Awesome. Fantastic. So we have some questions here from the viewers. We got Nandini. So Nandini says, hi, I want to become a business analyst. I'm going to complete Scrum Master course. What are the other courses I have to complete in order to become a business analyst? Any advice there?
Yeah, sorry to cut you off there, but I would say that there's no prescribed set of courses that you have to take to become a business analyst, right? There's a lot of training programs out there that will teach you the basic skills that you need to be an analyst, but being a business analyst isn't like being a professional engineer. Like there isn't a prescribed set of things that you have to do and then get certified to be considered a business analyst. That's not how our profession works. There are certifications that exist out there. There are a lot of training programs that exist out there. What I would say is that you should choose a training program that tries to teach you business analysis from an organization's point of view. It explains to you what all the different types of environments are that exist out there that you could end up at. And it teaches you how to think about actually, see, the one skill that I think a lot of new analysts are missing is that they're looking for a prescription of how do I become a business analyst. Well, as a business analyst, you're a problem solver. You have to have the right mental structures to be able to analyze a situation and come up with a solution. There's a guided way you can do that. So search for training programs. If you're a total beginner, search for like a foundational or a fundamentals training program that'll get you introduced to the basic concepts of business analysis. And then after that, depending on the type of analyst you want to be, you have a couple of different paths that you can take once you've understood the fundamentals. The one thing that every business analyst needs to make sure that they master is the ability to produce business requirements and functional specifications or software requirement specifications. Without that capability, most employers won't consider you to be a business analyst. So if you understand the fundamentals and you're really trying to figure out, hey, where should I go next? Try to understand, how do I produce business requirements for different types of solutions in different types of organizations? And I would plug our own course here, but I'll leave it to your members to decide. Go ahead. Well, I mean, we have a course that is oriented towards that, but by no means are we the only one. So I'll let you know that I'm building a course to teach business analysts to actually how to do that. But I would say do your research, try to find a program that's going to work for you, but just make sure you're learning how to produce requirements and specifications. That's a key skill that you need to have.
Awesome. Fantastic advice. Nandini, hope that helps. And definitely make sure you check out, how Emal might be able to help with some of his training. I did put a link in the comments, so feel free to check that out, Nandini. And thanks so much for tuning in. We have some comments here. We got Aditya on YouTube. Sorry, where did that comment go? Where is it? Yeah, here we go. No, sorry, I'm just getting mixed up here. The comments are updating while I'm doing it. Yeah, so Aditya on YouTube says... There we go. I think dealing with anti-patterns of Agile is the biggest impediment for developers.
Yeah, so this is getting very abstract. Yeah. So developers basically have a set of templates that they can apply to different problems. And then there are certain things that there are templates for what not to do. And those are what they call anti-patterns a lot of times. And so I don't want to dive too deeply into it. I think that's a very development specific question, but that's a big part of some of the issues.
Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah. We have another comment here from Sandeepan. Sandeepan, thanks for tuning in. So Sandeepan says, more than developers adapting to delivering small increments, it's management who needs to understand the increments need to be small. You are touching on that now.
That's right. I would very much agree with that. And I would also say that what tends to happen in most organizations that try to go agile is that it creates a bit of a vacuum when it comes to responsibility. Because normally in most traditional projects, most waterfall projects, and even in waterfall agile projects, you have a project manager. Regardless of what happens, the management of the organization never goes directly to the business analyst, to a specific developer, and says, hey, why did we miss that deadline? They will go to the project manager, because the project manager is responsible for the cost, they're responsible for schedule and scope, and they're responsible for making sure that all of the situation on the ground is communicated to management properly. One of the things that tends to happen when organizations try to go to agile is that you remove the project manager, but they don't fill that responsibility vacuum properly. The Scrum Master's job isn't to do that, right? The Agile coach's job is not to manage the actual project, but
Right.
it creates a responsibility vacuum that many team members don't know how to deal with, and things just end up becoming more chaotic. So I would say I very much agree with what has been said there, and what management really should understand is that there are limitations to what Agile can do for them. So they need to be a little bit wary of a lot of the marketing hype that happens around Agile as well.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. And again, thanks for your comments, Sandeepan. So speaking of the role of the business analyst, Emal, like what are some of your suggestions for the viewers who are BAs or aspiring BAs in terms of best practices and avoiding common mistakes that you have seen as a senior business analyst yourself, that business analysts make?
I would say one of the biggest mistakes that most new analysts make is that they see themselves more as a note taker than as an analyst, right? So, and it's okay for the first little while, because when you're first getting acquainted to the role, you might have to just take down what the client says and go off and think about it, and then come back. And in some cases, your analysis work won't even factor into the work. You just basically are a person who's communicating what the client is asking for to a team, and you're helping them refine it. Most analysts that start off will start off in that type of a role, and it's okay. I would say that what most analysts should strive to do is to become the type of person that the organization goes to say, hey, we have a certain challenge. We're not going to hold your hand through this. We don't know what the solution is. Can you do what you do to help us through this process, right? Mm-hmm. Once you get up to a certain senior level, so for example, when I start with my consulting contracts, there is very little, I'm told very little. And my job is to exactly diagnose what the problem is, and then come up with a solution that is implementable, and it is at a cost that the organization can handle. There's very little of what people, in those types of situations, very rarely does a client come and say, I know exactly what I want. I just want you to note it down and give it to me. They'll normally, and with the clients that do, I normally advise them to say, I think that's your point of view on what you think you need. Let us take this back and validate it, because the actual solution might look very differently once we do a full discovery and we figure out what some of the other factors are. Most analysts who start off new will start off more as kind of like note takers, but what they should strive to do is to take on more of the responsibility of understanding the problem, and of actually designing out solutions. And it takes time and experience, and going through some hard times to get there. But once you get there, you'll love your career a lot more.
Awesome, fantastic, some great information, folks. Make sure you hit like, comment, and share, so that those in your network might be interested in hearing this great information, can benefit as well. Definitely make sure you do that. So in terms of, and this is something I hear a lot, as a recruiter, Emal, is dealing with difficult stakeholders. So what is your advice to the other business analysts out there? How do you deal with difficult stakeholders, maybe people giving you pushback? What's your recommended strategy on dealing with that?
So the key thing to know there is to know exactly why they're being difficult, right? When you enter a situation, it's very, very rarely that it's just a person's personality, or a person is just not willing to play ball for whatever reason. There are usually very good reasons for why your clients will be difficult. And if you can figure out why they're being difficult, then you have a path forward. So we can talk about a couple of examples. A lot of times when I enter into a consulting engagement, I'll go into an environment where there's a lot of history, right? And I might be dealing with a customer at that client site who has had a bad history of project implementation with that IT group, and the relationship isn't very good. Now, if I realize that that's the problem, then I realize that I make sure that I let those customers know that, look, things are going to be a little bit different here because I'm here to help you make sure your business needs are met with the best solution possible. And even though normally I get hired through IT, I have to have a lot of difficult conversations with the IT groups to get them to do things a little bit differently. And so I have to deal with some of the tension with the groups that I'm working with on a regular basis to make that happen, right? That's just one example. And so there are so many different reasons that a client can be difficult that you really have to really just understand what their issue is and know how to solve that issue. Now, in the rare instances where a person is just being difficult just to be difficult, that does happen sometimes, very rarely, but it does happen. If I realize that that's just what the problem is, then we need to escalate it and we need to make sure that we get somebody else on the project, because that's a massive risk to the project. Company can spend tons of money, but if they don't have the buy-in of the person who's actually driving the ship from a business point of view, the company will waste all its money in doing that implementation. So if that happens, very rarely, then there are actions that you can take to try to resolve it.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. So we have a question here from Asha. It is a two-part. She put it in 2 comments, but Asha says, "I'm working as a business analyst. I've done PSPO and going for CBAP, and she's asking, is it fruitful?"
It all depends on what you're trying to do. So, generally speaking, and we get this question in our community a lot: should I get certified? And I've actually done a full, I think, 30-minute video on just answering that one question. Should you get certified? And I'll walk you through it. I'll give you a quick summary of that video right now. Certifications can do certain things for you, but they are not a fix-all solution to your business analysis career development plan, okay? That's what people need to understand. Typically, what I tell people to do is to get as much experience as possible. I'm building a training program, but I would tell most people that even training shouldn't be your primary source of skills. Experience is your primary source of skills. So the more work you can do to try to get yourself into an environment where you're actually performing as a business analyst, that is going to trump any level of training that you do with any training provider. That's going to trump any certification that you can get. Okay, that's the first thing. Where certifications can help is if you are somebody who is concerned about credibility in the job market. So I'm a practicing business analyst. I've been doing it for 15 years. I do not have any certifications in business analysis. And that I've considered them in the past, but the trade-off for me just hasn't been worth it, because I don't have a difficult time convincing an employer that I can actually come in and solve your problems, right? If I saw that there was a credibility issue and that my ability to do the work is up for question, I would strongly consider doing a CBAP certification or a PMI PBA. There are a lot of certifications out there that you can choose from, but the key here is to really understand what problem are you trying to solve, right? Are you just relying on the certification as kind of a crutch because you don't really understand what the issue is in your career? Or do you have a real strategic plan for your own career that you know that your certification is going to help you with? So you have to be very clear on that. Again, if you want more info on that, I can share that link with you, Dean, and we can show them the video of where I basically talk about this, like I said, for a good 30 minutes. Right, the other key point that I touch on there is that when you're considering investing in certifications, for a lot of analysts, what I do is that I normally advise them to do what I've done in my own career, which is invest maybe possibly in domain knowledge over a business analysis certification. So for example, when I was working, and I got bored working in a couple of industries, and I really wanted to enter the investment industry as a business analyst, I had a specific goal. I said, I want to work for a company that does either mutual funds or is in the capital markets, some area in that domain. I reverse engineered that plan, and I said, well, how do I get into that? I looked at the job postings. I realized many of them are asking for the Canadian securities course, for example. I didn't have that, right? And so what did I do? Well, I chose to do the Canadian securities course to be able to qualify for those types of roles. And eventually it worked. I ended up working for a mutual fund company. I, was satisfied in my career there, and I said it's time to move on to something else, right? So understand the value of the certification, and do not think that you are automatically you should automatically do a business analysis certification. There are so many professionals out there that work in banks that could, for example, the other example that I gave is many professionals out in banks that could benefit more from doing an anti-money laundering certification, for example. That in itself teaches you, hey, what do these financial processes look like? How do you identify certain types of transactions? That domain knowledge as an analyst can be way more valuable than a business analysis certification. So that's the guidance that I normally give to our members when they ask that question.
Yeah, fantastic advice, Emal. I definitely agree with that, because that's pretty much what I advise, a lot of job seekers when they reach out to me is, look, first of all, you have to have an understanding about what your own career goals are, and then doing your due diligence and researching whether this certification or whatever you want to pursue, if it makes sense for you, and what's going to be the return on investment as well. So great, fantastic advice there, Emal.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I hope that helps, Sasha, and thanks for your question. We have a question here from Kurian. So Kurian, thanks for tuning in.
So Kurian's one of our community members too, and
awesome,
Charmy was too. That's why I said hi to her at the beginning.
Okay, got it. So Kurian says, as the deliverables remain the same, can we say that for a BA, there's not much difference between Waterfall or Agile, just that we need to revisit the deliverables quite often in Agile?
That I think the short answer I would say is no. When you're talking about deliverables as an analyst, your deliverables are not an end in itself, right? What we do as analysts, if we produce the perfect deliverables and no solution gets built, there's very little value there. What Agile does is it doesn't actually really care about our deliverables very much. What Agile says is get a product out to the customer as quickly as possible, get feedback. What an analyst has to do now to satisfy those conditions it really depends on the environment. So, for example, as an analyst working on let's say a big project, I would need to do a certain amount of process design work before we can even consider delivering a product. Now, as an analyst, if you haven't done that pre-work, your job on an Agile project is going to be extremely difficult, because many of the business assumptions that should have been made right up front haven't been already made. And now you're scrambling to try to get people in a room to try to get the answers that you need, that the development team is asking you for, because they're going, they want to release in 2 weeks. And so you have to understand that as an analyst, your deliverables are a means to an end. And that end is get a product out. They're not an end in itself. So in the way that we do our work as analysts on Waterfall projects, we have the luxury of defining the solution, thinking through exactly how things fit together, and then going into development. In Agile, many times, and again, it has a lot to do with the way that management perceives Agile. If management doesn't see the fact that you have to do a certain amount of pre-requirements work before you can actually even figure out what the requirements are, you're already in a bind, and you have to do a lot of firefighting to get yourself out of that situation.
Okay, gotcha. Fantastic. Hope that helps, Kurian, and thanks for your question. We have a question here from Majid. So Majid, thanks for tuning in. Majid says, hi, Emal. Essentially, a business analyst is a change agent in an organization. How do you overcome the resistance of large organizations to change their approach?
So let's assume that we're talking about changing the approach from Waterfall to Agile, because that question, I could read it a couple of times. It could also mean how do you actually work with your business side to resist them from changing with the solution you're giving. But let's assume we're talking here about a company who is a large organization who wishes to go Agile, and they don't know how, or they're not going to do it properly. I would say that in the cases where that's happening, what management of that organization should do is engage a company who specializes in Agile, but one that has done successful implementations in the past and found the right fit for the organizations that they've worked with in the past. So there are consulting companies out there that will help you become more agile. But like I said, with any other product out there on the market, there are ones who do it very well, and then there are ones who don't do it as well. The types of consulting companies that come in with a template and say, here, you have to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to fill these roles, and they don't really try to understand the specific constraints that those organizations are facing, that's going to be a disastrous situation, because they're going to try to apply a template to a situation that's going to create more chaos. So my guidance there would be is that as analysts, that's not really our responsibility. We can do our parts to fit into the commitments that senior management makes, but it's really senior management that needs to make sure they've engaged the right agile consulting company, the right vendor, to help them implement that change in the company.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Emal. And Majid, thanks for your question. Hope that helps. We have a question here. So this is fantastic. We got a lot of questions from the viewers, so keep them coming, folks. But we have a question here from Helen. And Helen says, well said on the PM role and responsibilities that is missed in Agile. What is your advice on who should really fill up that vacuum space?
So the one way that I've seen this work really well in reality is that when you go agile, your software development team should always have a team captain or a lead architect. And that person is now the person who manages all of the other developers. It can't be a situation where everybody has equal say in everything, and you try to run a democracy that way. That doesn't work. You have to have a team captain that manages the developers, and you should typically have a very strong product owner who is willing to make decisions, possibly on the customer's behalf, and take responsibility for those decisions. If you can pull that, I've seen it work very well that way. I've been in an organization where I've been the analyst, and I've worked with a development team who's really well organized and can deliver regular releases because of the fact that they have filled in that responsibility gap that the project manager leaves behind. So that's one way of doing it.
Okay, fantastic, and hope that helps, Helen. And thanks for your engagement. We have a question here from Rajesh. So Rajesh says, Emal, what's the most frequently used tool used for Agile and Waterfall or even hybrid approaches, respectively?
So that's because the tools can do many different things. But if you're talking about tools to help you manage the work of Agile, I would say that some of the big ones out there are Jira is probably hands down probably the most prevalent one out there. So if you're trying to manage all of the work that happens on an Agile team, you could get yourself a Jira implementation, configure it to work the way that your team works, and that would probably be the best tool for your organization. I've worked with it a couple of times in different organizations. It's a great tool. If it's configured right, it's a great tool.
Okay, amazing. So hope that helps, Rajesh. Thanks for your question. We have a question here, and my apologies. Sometimes LinkedIn does not show the name of the person, but whoever asked this, in validation of problems or notes, what tools will you recommend? I know tools will be specific to the need. I guess you kind of already answered this.
Validation of problem. Yeah, I didn't really understand that question very well.
All right, no worries. Yeah, so whoever wrote that, if you want to clarify that question, feel free to do so. And looks like that's all the questions so far. But Emal, I mean, before we kind of start wrapping this up, and by the way, folks, if anyone has any questions, I probably have time for maybe one or two more. But Emal, what's your advice and tips for the new graduates and the students who might be graduating soon, who want to explore this path of a business analyst? Any words of wisdom, especially during these times that we're in right now?
Yes, I would say that for most new graduate business analysts, you probably have an opportunity that a lot of practicing professionals don't. That opportunity is in new grad programs that many companies operate. So, for example, you'll have a lot of the consulting companies, the Accentures and the Deloittes, et cetera, will have programs where what they do is they'll have a rotational program where they expressly hire nothing but new graduates. So me as a practicing business analyst, I don't have access to that, right? Essentially what organizations do is they say, we want a fresh grad who knows what they're doing to a certain extent, but that can come in and learn our way of doing things and learn our organization inside out. And then we'll see how well they'll do inside our organizations. That opportunity exists for new grads that doesn't exist for practicing professionals. Those opportunities can be few and far in between, so it's a little bit competitive. But if you can, do whatever you can to try to get yourself into one of those types of programs. With everything else that's going on right now, I think that it's nearly impossible for anybody to predict what the future looks like. I can make a few predictions, But I would say that if anybody who claims they have the answer, I would question that person pretty heavily. I would say that for most of what is going to happen in the next 6 to 8 months is that there may be less work out there for analysts just because of the fact that the economy has slowed down. Anytime the economy slowed down, there's less work for everybody. And so depending on how the economy goes in most of the globe, there is going to be a certain amount of slowdown that happens. I think the longer and the more longer term lesson for many people out there is that we need to do things online. We need to leverage technology a lot more, because if this type of thing happens again and it's worse the next time, we need to be very well prepared for that. And so I think it's a wake-up call for many organizations to say, look, we need the ability to have people working from home on the drop of a dime. If that needs to happen, that has to be part of our business continuity plan. A lot of that is going to require analysts to implement different types of solutions in organizations. So once we get over the trough of the economy going down, I think there's going to be a huge resurgence for demand for analysts, because companies realize we need to implement a lot more tech, and we need to do it in a good way. And there's nobody better in the world to do that than business analysts. So if you can withstand the trough of the economy going down a little bit, and you can hang in there for however long it takes for the economy to kick back in, once it kicks back in, I think you're going to have a heyday. I think all analysts out there, anybody who is well versed in certain types of system implementations, doing requirements analysis, and trying to figure out how to implement those types of solutions, in the long run, there's going to be a lot more demand for that. That's my prediction.
Okay.
Timelines, like I said, timelines is nearly impossible to guess because it's on a day-by-day basis. We're getting new news. But I would say that if you can, even if you're not able to get into a business analyst role right away, don't give up that hope. Because if you have the educational background and you can get yourself into, let's say, an accounts payable role, what you've done is you actually now have 2 steps into getting into an analyst role, because you have some educational background, and importantly, you have very important domain knowledge. Get yourself into a role where you can accumulate as much domain knowledge as you possibly can. So when the time comes, you can jump into an analyst role. And because of the fact that there are so many different types of analysts out there, you can get domain knowledge in almost any sector. Construction sector, for example, you want to go work for a construction company, accumulate as much domain knowledge about construction as possible, and then become a business analyst in the construction domain. You can apply this to almost any industry.
Fantastic. Love that, Emal. I really appreciate that advice. And for those of you watching who are students or new grads or even anyone else, that's some great information. One more question, Emal, and this is more so a career/situational question. So this one is from Ibukun. So thanks for tuning in. So she says, hi, I'm a BA and recently landed a job. The job was advertised with about 60% BA functions. On the job, it's more of a business analytics role. I'm thinking of getting another full BA job. What's your take on that?
I would say that if you've been told that the job is one thing and the job ends up being something else, I think you'd be well within your rights to make a move. So, for example, if you look at the job description that was advertised to you and you interviewed for one job and then you show up on day one and you're getting something completely different, then I think that moving is probably not just your best option, but probably your only option. Okay. And this actually also touches on a very common thing that happens in our industry, is that there is a lot of confusion between analytics and analyst roles. So your employer might not necessarily have done this on purpose, because I see a lot of job applications out there that have the title of a business analyst, but when you look at the description of the job, you see that there's very little business analysis work in the sense that we business BA professionals talk about it. There's very little of that work that's required. It's just a mistitled job description, right? So there's a lot of confusion, and I've produced a couple of video responses to some of our members where I outline very specific examples of large institutional organizations, course providers, universities who are making this big mistake. And it's creating a lot of confusion for a lot of business analysts out there. Analytics roles are typically just reporting roles. So you might need to know a little bit of SQL. You might need to work with some of the analytics tools that exist out there, like Tableau. Business Objects used to be one that SAP bought out. So those are what analytics roles are. Your analytics role requires you to go in, understand what kind of reports need to be built, and then figure out how to do that. For most business analysts, analytics is a very tiny fraction of what we do. So as part of a solution that we're delivering, we might have to have certain types of reports that need to be built. And so we may need to do some specifications for reporting that needs to be done. What analytics role do is they basically take that one small aspect of our job and they turn it into an entire career. And if that's not what you signed up for, then I would say that you're moving into another role that is more business analysis oriented is probably your only option.
Okay, fantastic advice there. Thanks so much, Emal. And Ibu-kun, hope that answers your question. Hope that helps. So, folks, I'm going to wrap this up. Emal has been gracious to give us an hour of his time, so really appreciate that, Emal. Now, Emal, we do have a couple of viewers who want to connect with you directly, or they want to find out how they can follow you. What's the best way for them to connect with you via social media, Emal?
LinkedIn is a very good way. But if you have specific questions, I take all of my questions inside of our community. So we have a community of almost 1,000 people now. And the amount of questions that have come to us has been a little bit astounding. So we've created a questions backlog. So I keep track of all of the questions that come in. And so you can go inside our community. There's no charge. You can sign up for a free membership. We have a dedicated community manager who welcomes people and helps you get oriented. You can sign up there. And what you can do is just post your questions to our community. We have some more senior members of our community that also help us answer some questions. So when they have experienced a certain situation, they'll lend their insight. But if that doesn't happen, I'm always there, and I do detailed video responses for the questions that come up regularly. So change management, for example, if you want to understand how change management really works outside of theory, how it actually really works on the ground, I have about a 30-minute video you could watch, and it'll explain it to you inside out. No charge at all.
Awesome, fantastic. And we did have a couple of viewers, Emal. They wanted to, debate you on your thoughts about Agile. Like, are you okay with them reaching out to you as well?
Absolutely. And I would love to do another hosted session if we have people who have countering point of views.
Sure.
I would love to be in a situation where we can get a panel together, even possibly, and we can hash these things out. Because again, my biggest challenge is in trying to explain to people how things work on the ground. That is purely my main objective. How do things work on the ground? Let's forget about all the theory. Let's forget about everything that people are trying to sell you, or all of the marketing hype that exists out there. Let's try to cut through all of that. Let's talk about very specifics of how would you implement a project in Agile given certain pressures that exist. If we can get into that detailed level of a conversation, I might learn something I don't know. Right? So I'd love to have that type of a conversation.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, so I guess R is in the comments. You wanted to connect with Emal about that, so feel free to reach out to Emal directly. He's very open to having that conversation.
For sure.
And before we end this, Emal, can you tell the viewers more about the BA community and your training courses and your program?
So we have a community and a training program over at bablocks.com, BABLOCKS. And the way that the reason why we called it that is because these are basically the building blocks for your business analysis career, right? So you build them up one at a time, just the way you learned your alphabet with building blocks. You would do the same thing with your career. And so head over to bablocks.com. I know that you're probably going to provide everybody a link in the description there that will help them come in. And like I said, come join us. You don't even have to, if you're just want to learn and not ask any questions, just go through all of the material that we've published there, so you can learn from the questions that other people have asked. I get comments daily inside our community about how certain questions that I've answered have helped people land jobs. They've gone to interviews and they've performed better because they've learned from a lot of that free material that's in our community. So go in and join, and just have a supportive community there where you can start learning.
Awesome. Fantastic, Emal. Thanks so much. And folks, I did put a link in the comments, so make sure you check that out. And I thank you so much for your time, Emal. I'd love to have you back, and definitely see if we could get a panel thing going on as well. Yeah. I think that'd be very interesting for the viewers. A lot of positive feedback. Folks, make sure you thank Emal in the comments, and feel free to connect with him directly. And definitely let me know if you want me to bring Emal back on the show. I'm pretty sure most of you do. And Emal, thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for all the great information and answering the questions from the viewers. Really appreciate it. Everyone have a fantastic day. Emal, have a fantastic day, and we'll chat again soon.
Take care.
All right. Bye, everyone.